How clean is rainwater?
Rainwater, at least, when it is not acid rain, is normally very pure. Except for the small particle around which the raindrop originally formed. Once the raindrop hits the ground and is absorbed into the soil or evaporates, it leaves behind this nucleus, which is often formed from such matter as a dust speck or tiny grain of salt.
What country can claim to have the worst weather?
That redoubtable distinction goes to the United States of America. Subjected to hurricanes, flooding, drought, heat and cold waves, blizzards, and the worst tornado activity on the planet, the United States experiences more weather disasters than any other nation.
A comfortable humidity level for most people is between 30 and 60%. What is a hygrometer?
A hygrometer is an instrument that measures the humidity. Italian artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519, is often credited with constructing the first hygrometer. His design was later improved upon by Francesco Folli, 1624 to 1685, in 1664, and Swiss physicist and geologist Horace Benedict de Saussure, 1740 to 1799, designed the first mechanical hygrometers. There are basically two types of hygrometers. 1. Dry and wet bulb psychrometers, and 2. Mechanical hygrometers. The first type uses dry and wet bulb thermometers to compare temperature changes resulting from humidity. The second type uses either organic material, blonde human hairs, which expand or contract based on humidity levels, or semiconductors made of lithium chloride, or other substances whose degrees of electrical resistance change according to humidity.
What are some other unexpected places where it has snowed in the United States?
In Louisiana, 2 feet, 61 centimeters, of snow fell on the town of Rain on February 14, 1895. Another old record is held by Savannah, Georgia, where 18 inches, 46 centimeters, of the white stuff fell on January 10, 1800. More recently, residents of New Orleans were surprised to see snow accumulations on their front lawns on December 11, 2008.
What has recent sunspot activity been doing?
Sunspot activity during the dawning years of the 21st century has been a roller coaster ride. In 2004, it was reported that there were more sunspots on the Sun than the Earth had seen in some 8,000 years. The next year, however, there was an abrupt drop-off in sunspot activity. A trend that has continued through 2008 and into 2009. In fact, during the last months of 2008, there were almost no sunspots at all.
Do wind farms affect the weather?
Yes, to a degree. A 2008 study showed that large wind farms actually have an impact on local weather and climate. When one thinks about it, this makes sense. Farmers have for years been using large fans to decrease humidity and warm crops when there is a risk of a freeze. Wind farms, too, cause a decrease in humidity and raise temperatures, especially during the morning hours.
Where is the best place to hide from a tornado if I'm outdoors?
If there is no other shelter around, storm experts usually recommend that you find a trench or ditch if a tornado is approaching and you don't have time to get to a tornado shelter or basement. It is not a good idea to hide under a freeway overpass, as debris can still easily blow inside and prove deadly. Some people believe that you are safer if you are in a mountain valley, because the mountains will block tornadoes. Actually, tornadoes have swept through valleys, and they have even touched on mountain peaks. Tornadoes have been recorded in the Teton Wilderness area at elevations of more than 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters. And during the super tornado outbreak of 1974, many tornadoes struck high areas of the Appalachians. There is also a myth that standing near a river is a safe place to be during a tornado warning. Again, there have been a number of incidents during which tornadoes have been spotted near, or even crossing, streams and rivers as big as the Mississippi and Missouri. It is not unheard of to learn of boats that have been sunk while sailing down a river when a tornado struck.
Are there other types of tornado like whirlwinds?
Certainly. Smoke from forest fires and ash and steam from volcanoes can often stir about in vortices that look like weak tornadoes.
Who managed to calculate cosmic ray activity on Earth dating back over 11,000 years?
Sami Sołunki, 1958, an astronomy professor at Germany's Max Planck Institute, developed a method for estimating solar ray activity dating back millennia. Sołunki based his method on the knowledge that cosmic rays create chemical reactions in the atmosphere. One byproduct of these reactions is carbon-14, which then precipitates down onto the Earth's crust. Trees and other vegetation absorb this radioactive form of carbon, Preserved vegetation that has been buried underground for centuries can be dug up and its composition analyzed. Radiation from sunspots actually decreases the production of carbon-14, and so when sunspot activity is high, there is less carbon-14 for trees to absorb. Using this information, Solanki discovered that there has been more sunspot activity since around 1930 than during any other period going back 8,000 years.
At any one time, how many thunderstorms are occurring?
As astronauts orbiting our planet, especially over the night side, can attest, there are thunderstorms happening all over the place, all the time. On average, scientists believe there are about 2,000 active thunderstorms happening at any given time, day or night. This gives us about 16 million thunderstorms every year.
What is a bolt from the blue?
This expression relates to the fact that lightning can strike even when there is no rain and the sun has come out. In other words, blue sky may appear overhead, but there may still be lightning generating clouds nearby.
What measurements do weather satellites provide us?
Early weather satellites transmitted images of clouds and could also take infrared IR readings, which allowed for weather monitoring both day and night. With IR sensors, satellites can detect temperature readings, which can also indicate cloud elevation. Modern satellites are capable of many other observations, as well. Detailed images of not only clouds, but also land and sea surfaces and temperatures. Provide scientists with information about fog, snow, rain, ocean currents, haze, air pollution, ozone levels, soil moisture levels, airborne dust, and even volcano and forest fire activity. Satellites are also used to take surveys of agricultural activities and vegetation growth.
What is drizzle?
Drizzle is just small droplets of rain measuring, on average, about 0.02 inches, 0.05 centimeters, in diameter.
What caused the Bhopal disaster?
In December 1984, the U.S. owned Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, leaked toxic chemicals, methyl isocyanate gas, that killed over 3,800 people. It was the worst industrial accident in history. Union Carbide paid a fine of $470 million to avoid facing criminal charges.
What is the difference between a cyclone and a typhoon?
The words cyclone and typhoon are simply other words for hurricane. When hurricanes occur west of the international dateline in the Northwest Pacific Ocean, they are referred to as typhoons. And when they occur in the Indian Ocean and near Australia, they are called cyclones.
How can I measure how much rain falls where I live?
Any container with a flat bottom and flat sides can measure rainfall. The width of the top of the container must be the same as at the bottom of the container. But the diameter does not matter. It could be a device purchased for measuring precipitation or something as simple as a coffee can.
How did Mikhail Ivanovich Budiko calculate the temperature of Earth's climate?
Mikhail Ivanovich Budiko, 1920 to 2001, was a Belarusian meteorologist and physicist, as well as a pioneer in the specialized field of physical climatology. He was the author of the 1956 book Heat Balance of the Earth's Surface. In this work, he used the principles of physics to explain, as no one had done before, how energy from the sun is absorbed and then radiated back into the atmosphere by the Earth. Budiko's research led him to become concerned about climate change. And he was one of the first to realize that a buildup of carbon dioxide created by human industry was causing the atmosphere to warm up. He predicted that by 2070 the average temperature on Earth would be 6.3 degrees Fahrenheit. 3.5 degrees Celsius, higher than 1950 temperatures. Budiko was also one of the first to predict that a nuclear winter would result from a nuclear war.
What is a profiler?
Profilers use electromagnetic waves the same way that sonars use sound waves. This strategy has proven ideal for penetrating deep into the upper atmosphere, where meteorologists can then determine wind speeds at altitudes 5 to 10 miles, 8 to 17 kilometers, high.
Has Doppler radar made tornado forecasting better?
Although predicting tornadoes is still far from a perfect science, Doppler radar used by the NextRad system has improved the accuracy of prediction to about 80%, versus about 30% before NextRad. Smaller, quickly forming tornadoes are still nearly impossible to anticipate, but larger tornadoes, especially huge tornadoes in the F4 or F5 category range, are being anticipated with much better results. In fact, the National Weather Service is often able to warn nearby residents of a large tornado 20 or more minutes before it actually strikes. NextRad can do this by searching for tornadic mesocyclones, which are a good indicator of twisters. Any large tornado vortexes can actually be seen by Doppler radar these days. Thanks to these advances, it is much less likely that a big tornado will take nearby populations completely by surprise. Even a 10 or 20-minute warning can be enough to save dozens or even hundreds of lives.
So, what is the modern theory of plate tectonics?
The Earth's crust and lithosphere are broken into over a dozen thin, rigid shells, or plates, that move around the planet over the plastic asthenosphere in the upper mantle. The interaction between these plates is called tectonics. From the Greek tekton for builder, plate tectonics describes the deformation of the Earth's surface as these plates collide, pass by, go over, or go under each other. In other words, plate tectonics describes how these plates move, but not why. Overall, plate tectonics combines Wegener's theory of continental displacement, or drift, and Hess's discovery of seafloor spreading, sea below. The theory has truly revolutionized the study of the Earth's crust and deep interior. It allows scientists to study and understand the formation of such features as mountains, volcanoes, ocean basins, mid-ocean ridges, and deep-sea trenches, and to understand earthquakes and volcano formation. It also gives clues as to how the continents and oceans looked in the geologic past, and even how the climate and life forms evolved.
What is numerical weather prediction?
Numerical weather prediction or numerical forecasting is the science that believes that weather forecasting is possible if one has a thorough knowledge of the laws of physics and also knows the current state of the weather. Proposed by a group of Norwegian scientists collectively known as the Bergen School. The idea was that air behaves much like a fluid, and that it therefore adheres to the hydrodynamical equations that liquids like water do. Knowing the current state of the weather is vital, and so numerical forecasting relies heavily on having detailed weather reports from multiple locations before predictions can be made. Once this is available, mathematical formulas are applied to the weather's current state. Based on the principles of thermodynamics, the Boyle's law, Newtonian physics, and so on.
Who hires meteorologists?
Meteorologists can either work for the government or in the private sector. If they work for the government, they may be hired by a federal government agency or department, such as the National Weather Service, the Federal Aviation Administration, The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the Department of Energy, a national laboratory. Or the military, or, they could be hired by state, county, or city governments. Local governments hire meteorologists to monitor such things as air pollution and other environmental and resource management concerns. In the private sector, meteorologists can find employment at television stations, including the popular The Weather Channel. Airlines, universities, utility companies, climate research laboratories. Meteorological equipment manufacturers, private research contractors and forecasting services, weather modification companies. Private environmental organizations and companies, and even litigation support companies. A good place to start a job search is the job board postings on the American Meteorological Society's website at http://careercenter.amitsoc.org. If at all possible. Start building career connections as early as you can, preferably while you are still in school. Through work internships and contacts through your professors or other people you meet.
How do hurricanes get named?
The United States introduced the naming system in 1950 in which each hurricane is given a name in alphabetical order. In 1953, the naming convention was taken over by the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, which selected names from library sources and finalized lists during international meetings. Until 1978, all the names were female, but this practice ended with the 1979 hurricane season. And now names alternate between male and female. The names are all either English, Spanish, or French in origin. The names are chosen to reflect the cultures and languages found in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Hawaiian regions. When a tropical storm with rotary action and wind speeds above 39 miles, 63 kilometers per hour develops, the National Hurricane Center near Miami, Florida, selects a name from one of the 6 listings for Region 4, Atlantic and Caribbean area. Letters Q, U, X, Y, and Z are not included because of the scarcity of names beginning with those letters.
What is precession?
Precession is a phenomenon that results from the planet's changing tilt. You can think of it as a kind of wobbling effect. About 12,900 years from now, the North Pole will be tilted toward the Sun in January and away from it in June. This means that the winter season in the North will occur during the months that are now considered summer. Late June through early September, and summer will occur from January through March. This change will be gradual over time, and no one alive today or for many generations will be aware of it.
Why is it impossible to find a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow?
Even if there were a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, you could never reach it because the rainbow moves away from you as you approach it. The rainbow will always be positioned opposite the azimuth of the sun.
What would happen if a large comet or asteroid impact occurred?
If a large extraterrestrial body, such as a comet or asteroid, with a diameter of 6 miles, 10 kilometers, or more struck anywhere on our planet, land, or sea, the impact would be felt worldwide. The initial impact would vaporize parts of the Earth's crust, as well as the oceans, and send shock waves out to every corner of the globe. Debris would be shot out into the upper atmosphere, and the heat generated from the collision with the atmosphere and crust would turn the sky red and set the world's forests aflame. After the initial collision, debris would rain down everywhere, destroying even those buildings, wildlife, and people who were far from the impact. Virtually all living things inhabiting the surface would be killed. And even sea creatures would die as the temperatures of the oceans reached the boiling point. Long after the impact, the atmosphere would be coated in a layer of ash that would circle the Earth for months or even years, plunging the planet into a nuclear winter after the initial fireball. About the only things that might survive such as is believed to have happened 65 million years ago. After the last such event would be creatures that could burrow underground or hide deep inside caves.
What is the difference between a tornado watch and a warning?
A tornado watch means that weather conditions within the next few hours are favorable for the formation of tornadoes. When a watch is issued, it is wise to listen to radio or television reports for updates. And you should make any preparations necessary in case you need to seek immediate shelter. A tornado warning means that an actual tornado has been spotted on Doppler radar or by an observer in your area, and you should immediately take shelter.
What unexpected cooling phenomena are happening because of global warming?
It might be counterintuitive, but as the globe seems to warm, temperature readings indicate summer maximum temperatures are on the decline. However, at the same time, winter minimum temperatures are on the rise, so that the overall average has been an increase in temperature. Meanwhile, up in the stratosphere, the temperature has been cooling even as surface temperatures warm up. The reason for this is the destruction of ozone gases, which absorb ultraviolet radiation, which generates heat. The less ozone, the more UV radiation gets through the stratosphere. so it does not have as much of a chance to warm up. Records taken since 1979 show that 3 of the coldest stratospheric readings have been in 1997, 2000, and 2006.
Am I getting hit by cosmic rays?
Everyone is being struck by cosmic rays all the time, probably about several each second. Ordinarily, the number of cosmic rays that strike you have no negative effect on your health. Even though the energy of these particles is very high, the number of them striking you is relatively low. If you went beyond Earth's magnetosphere, though, your health might be at risk. On Earth's surface, the magnetosphere acts as a shield against cosmic rays by redirecting them toward Earth's magnetic poles. Thousands of miles up, however, the cosmic ray flux on your body would be much higher, and thus cause potentially more damage to your body's cells and systems.
What is the heat index?
The heat index is a measurement of what hot weather feels like to the average person for various temperatures and relative humidities. Heat exhaustion and sunstroke are inclined to happen when the heat index reaches 105 degrees Fahrenheit 40 degrees Celsius. The reason why it feels hotter to people when it is more humid is that the body cools itself by perspiring. Beads of perspiration help cool the skin as they evaporate. But when the air is too humid to allow for this evaporation, this natural cooling system no longer works well. The danger point for humans can occur when the heat index is between 90 degrees Fahrenheit 32 degrees Celsius and 104 degrees Fahrenheit 40 degrees Celsius. And when the heat index reaches above these temperatures, weather conditions become very dangerous indeed. At this extreme, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, or sunstroke may occur quickly. Especially during physical activity, and it is very important to stay in the shade and remain hydrated. The chart below provides the heat index for some temperatures and relative humidities.
Does global warming increase the incidence of diseases?
Warmer temperatures tend to encourage pests to flourish. This includes everything from insects and rodents to viruses and germs. Mosquitoes, which are responsible for killing more human beings than any other animal on the planet because they spread disease through exposure to blood, thrive nicely in hot to temperate climates. Their breeding cycles become shorter, which allows them to reproduce more frequently each year. Mosquitoes spread diseases such as malaria and dengue fever. Rodents, carrying disease-spreading parasites like fleas and ticks, also spread their ranges as climates warm. The problem is multiplied by the fact that along with global warming comes drought, flooding, and famine, which lead to poverty, homelessness, and unsanitary water supplies. All of these encourage unsanitary living conditions that help spread diseases, such as cholera. According to a 2008 statement by the World Health Organization, about 150,000 people are dying every year from malnutrition. Diarrhea, and malaria, much of it provoked by climate change. Hardest hit are poorer countries in Africa and Southeast Asia.
What is a 100-year flood?
A 100-year flood refers not only to the size of a flood, but also to the odds of it occurring. A 100-year flood has a 1%, or 1 in 100, chance of occurring in any given year. It has no relationship to the frequency of occurrence. The magnitude of such a flood is relative to the frequency of occurrence. So a 100-year flood is much larger than any run-of-the-mill annual flood. A 500-year flood has only a 1 in 500, 0.2%. chance of occurring in any given year and would be much larger and more devastating than a 100-year flood.
What is the tropopause?
He learned that, after about 7 miles, 11 kilometers, the air stopped becoming cooler and leveled off for as high as the balloons could go. He concluded that the atmosphere was divided into 2 layers, which he named the troposphere and the stratosphere. Later, in the 1920s, meteorologists Gordon Miller-Bourne Dobson, 1889 to 1976, and F. A. Lindemann, First Viscount Cherwell, 1886-1957, used studies of meteor trails to learn that temperatures warmed in the atmosphere as high as 30 miles, 48 kilometers, up. Dobson concluded that ultraviolet radiation absorbed by the ozone in the stratosphere was the reason for the warmer air.
What is a hypercane?
Professor Carey Emanuel at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is an authority on using computer models to simulate hurricane activity. In one extreme scenario, Emanuel hypothesized what might happen if a large asteroid hit one of Earth's oceans. Of course, there would be monstrous waves and immense heat generated by the impact. But there would be another side effect as well, a hypercane. A hypercane would occur after the impact because deep ocean waters would heat up. The result would be a strange hurricane that would only be about 10 to 20 miles. 16 to 32 kilometers, across but would have incredible winds reaching 500 miles, 800 kilometers, per hour. Such a hypercane would also be capable of jettisoning moisture upwards of 25 miles. 40 kilometers, into the atmosphere.
How thick is Earth's atmosphere?
Earth's atmosphere extends hundreds of miles beyond its surface. But it is much denser at the surface than at high altitudes. About half of the gas in Earth's atmosphere is within a few kilometers of the surface. And 95% of the gas is found within 12 miles, 19 kilometers, of the surface.
Can meteorologists predict tornadoes?
It is difficult to nearly impossible to predict where and whether or not a tornado will strike. All forecasters can do is warn people when conditions are right for tornadoes to form. Or, if one is sighted, to tell people to take shelter. Meteorologists look for tornadic thunderstorms that have strong indications of wind shear, lift, moisture, and instability. No one type of weather pattern leads to tornado formation, which greatly complicates forecasting efforts. To aid in their predictions, meteorologists use all sorts of technology, including weather balloons, Doppler radar, satellites, data from weather stations, lightning strike plots, and computer modeling.
Where is lightning most likely to occur?
Lightning tends to strike more often over land masses than over oceans. And it is more frequently seen in the tropics, where 2/3 of the electrical storms happen.
Why is it important to understand geography in relation to the weather?
There are a couple of reasons why geography is an important science for meteorologists to understand. One is that geographical features, such as mountains and coastlines, have an important influence on the weather. The other is that meteorologists interpret data from satellites, radar, and computer projections on various types of maps, and it is important for them to be able to visualize this data in three-dimensional space because the planet is not flat.
What is an urban heat island?
Because urban areas are generally devoid of significant vegetation. The concrete and other construction materials for buildings and roads prevent the heat from the sun from being absorbed. Instead, surfaces become hotter and drier. Cities and towns become warmer than surrounding rural areas to the point where, on a warm summer day, surfaces such as sidewalks and roofs can be as much as 50 degrees to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 to 50 degrees Celsius, hotter than the surrounding air. The warming effects are especially pronounced during the day. But the temperatures are also affected at night. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, A city of about 1 million people can cause the surrounding atmosphere to heat up as much as 22 degrees Fahrenheit. 12 degrees Celsius, more than it would be under similar weather conditions in a rural area. Annually, the effect would be that the overall temperature for a city that size would be 1.8 to 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. 1 to 3 degrees Celsius, higher than in the surrounding areas. There are several problems that result from heat islands. People tend to use their air conditioners and other utilities more, thus increasing energy consumption. This leads to more pollution, including greenhouse gases. These pollutants also affect human health. Finally, rainwater that has fallen onto heated surfaces on pavement and roofs flows into sewers, and then into the environment, where the heated water affects wildlife.
Do turtles and frogs have antifreeze in their blood?
For a long time, it was a puzzle as to how cold-blooded reptiles and amphibians such as turtles and frogs survived in northern climes. These animals' body temperatures unlike with warm-blooded animals such as dogs, deer, and people plummet with the cooling temperatures. Many of them live underground near ponds and streams. As the temperatures outside cool, their body metabolism slows down, which makes it possible to survive long periods without much food, or even oxygen. Furthermore, many species of frogs and turtles have been found to use glucose compounds as a kind of antifreeze that allows their bodies to freeze without their blood and other body fluids forming harmful crystals that would otherwise destroy their tissues.
What is a tropical storm?
You can think of a tropical storm as a less intense hurricane. You can also call a hurricane a more intense tropical storm. If wind speeds are between 38 and 74 miles, 61 and 119 kilometers per hour, then it is considered a tropical storm and not a hurricane.
What is a swamp cooler?
A swamp cooler is an alternative to a traditional air conditioner. A traditional air conditioner uses compressed freon gas to cool the air. This system works very well in most climates where the humidity is above 30%. In drier climates, below 30% humidity, a swamp cooler is very effective. Also called an evaporative cooler, a swamp cooler works sort of like a wet bulb thermometer. Pads inside the cooler absorb water, and a fan then blows on the pads, cooling the air and making it more humid. Swamp coolers are more energy efficient than regular air conditioners because the only electricity needed is what is used for the fan, no compressor is required.
What is a storm surge?
Not to be confused with a tsunami, a storm surge is a sudden upwelling of ocean water caused by winds and pressure changes affecting the water's surface. Hurricanes generate large wave swells that radiate outwards in all directions as they travel over the ocean. The swells, which can move toward the shoreline about 3 or 4 times faster than the actual storm, arrive on land before hurricanes strike. Before advanced weather systems and the use of satellites, these swells warned people that a hurricane was approaching. The swells become storm surges by the time the main storm arrives, raising water levels as much as 25 feet, 7.5 meters, and causing massive coastal flooding. By some estimates, the storm surge resulting from 2005's Hurricane Katrina was 28 feet, 8.5 meters.
When did modern weather forecasting begin?
On May 14, 1692, a weekly newspaper, a collection for the improvement of husbandry and trade, gave a 7-day table with pressure and wind readings for the comparable dates of the previous year. Readers were expected to make up their own forecasts from the data. Other journals soon followed with their own weather features. In 1771, a new journal called the Monthly Weather Paper was completely devoted to weather prediction. In 1861, the British Meteorological Office began issuing daily weather forecasts. The first broadcast of weather forecasts was done by the University of Wisconsin Station 9XM at Madison, Wisconsin, on January 3, 1921.
How large can hailstones become?
The average hailstone is about 1/4 inch, 0.64 centimeter, in diameter. However, hailstones weighing up to 7.5 pounds, 3.4 kilograms, are reported to have fallen in Hyderabad state in India in 1939. Although scientists think these huge hailstones may be several stones that partly melted and stuck together. On April 14, 1986, hailstones weighing 2.5 pounds, 1 kilogram, were reported to have fallen in the Gopalganj district of Bangladesh. There was also a report of a hailstone weighing 4.5 pounds, 2.04 kilograms, in Germany. The current claim to fame for largest hailstone found in the United States was one that was measured to have a circumference of 18.75 inches, 47.625 centimeters, that fell in Aurora, Nebraska, in June 2003. Before that, the record was held by a 17.5 inch, 44.45 centimeter, stone found in Coffeyville, Kansas, in September 1970. When it comes to weight, however, the Coffeyville stone was 1.67 pounds, 0.76 kilograms, while the Aurora hailstone was a fluffier 1.3 pounds, 0.59 kilograms.
Do oceans get more rain than land?
The oceans receive just over their share, percentage-wise, of the world's precipitation, about 70%. The remaining 30% of precipitation falls on the continents. Some areas of the world receive far more precipitation than others. Some parts of equatorial South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and nearby islands receive over 200 inches, 500 centimeters, of rain a year. While some desert areas receive only a fraction of an inch of rain per year.
What are some disturbing statistics regarding air pollution in Egypt?
The World Health Organization estimated that breathing the air in Cairo, Egypt, is the toxic equivalent of smoking 20 cigarettes every day. Damage to the Egyptian economy as a result of pollution is also troubling, with the World Bank noting in 2002 that 5% of the country's gross domestic product, or about $2.42 billion US dollars, are lost annually due to damages attributed to pollution.
As for the future, who knows?
Hurricanes seem to be increasing in size and number in the 21st century. And it is possible that one could travel across, say, northern Mexico and then reach southern California.
What is the Landsat program?
In 1972, NASA launched the first Landsat, land satellite, in cooperation with the U.S. Geological Survey, while taking photos and measurements related to the planet's surface. These satellites also provide a considerable amount of weather-related information. For example, Landsat satellite data has recorded the impacts of weather disasters, monitors flooding, and takes other measurements of interest to hydrologists. Recent surveys of land use have also resulted in studies about the effects of human activities on weather. For example, in 2006, an atmospheric modeling study was conducted on the state of Florida. Scientists compared estimates of vegetation coverage in the year 1900 with present conditions and demonstrated how urban and rural activities were affecting rainfall. It was estimated that Florida now experiences 12% less rain than it would have a century ago.
What is the National Hurricane Center?
Based at Florida International University near Miami. The National Hurricane Center is part of the National Weather Service. Its mission is to predict and warn of dangerous hurricanes in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. The headquarters building itself is heavily fortified against hurricanes. Having 10-inch thick walls, roll-down shutters for its windows. And being far enough inland to be safe from storm surges, it is designed to survive 130-mile, 210 km per hour winds so that it can still be operational after almost any hurricane.
How far does the solar wind travel?
The sun's corona extends millions of miles beyond the sun's surface. The plasma of the solar wind, however, extends billions of miles farther, well beyond the orbit of Pluto. Beyond there, the plasma density continues to drop. There is a limit, called the heliopause, where the influence of the solar wind dwindles to just about nothing. The region inside the heliopause, which is thought to be some 8 to 14 billion miles, 13 to 22 billion kilometers, from the Sun, is called the heliosphere.
Who was Paul A. Sipple, and how is he associated with the concept of the wind chill factor?
The Antarctic explorer Paul A. Sipple, 1908 to 1968, coined the term in his 1939 dissertation. Adaptation of the explorer to the climate of Antarctica. Sipple was the youngest member of Rear Admiral Richard Byrd's 1888 to 1957 Antarctica expedition. 1928 to 1930, and later made other trips to the Antarctic as part of Byrd's staff and for the U.S. Department of the Interior assigned to the U.S. Antarctic expedition. Sipple later conducted experiments using a container of water subjected to specific temperatures and wind speeds to see how fast it would freeze. He also served in many other endeavors related to the study of cold climates.
What remarkable observation did science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke make?
Arthur C. Clarke, 1917 to 2008, is well known to science fiction fans. His 1948 short story The Sentinel was the basis for the 1968 film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Among his many accomplishments, he was also very interested in satellites. During World War II, Clarke was a radar technician for the Royal Air Force. And in 1945 he proposed designs for a communications system using satellites. He reasoned that this was possible if satellites could be placed in orbit above the equator while traveling 22,248 miles, 35,797 kilometers, per hour. This would put them in geostationary orbit, meaning that each satellite would remain directly above a predetermined point on the Earth's surface. This idea proved correct, and is used now for both communications and weather satellites. The Clarke Belt, a band of space over the equator at an altitude of 22,300 miles. 35,800 kilometers, where geostationary satellites may orbit, is named in his honor.
What caused all the flooding in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina?
Most people now agree that the destruction of New Orleans could have largely been avoided had the canal levees, built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, been up to the task of controlling the storm surges. Because many of the levees failed, 80% of the city was engulfed in water.
What is carbon monoxide?
Carbon monoxide, CO, is an odorless, colorless, and tasteless gas that is lethal. Auto exhaust is one common source. But CO can result from the combustion of almost any material containing carbon. The molecules bond to hemoglobin in the blood, preventing the hemoglobin from transporting oxygen through the body as it normally does. Depriving organs and other tissues of oxygen can result in death within minutes. The early symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, however, include drowsiness, disorientation, and headaches. In well-ventilated areas, carbon monoxide poisoning should not be a problem. But in closed-in areas, such as a garage, it is hazardous. This is why you should never leave your car running inside a garage. But carbon monoxide can also come from clogged chimneys, unvented space heaters, gas appliances, grills, and lawn mowers. Homes should be equipped with carbon monoxide monitors as a precaution. While carbon monoxide poisoning is more likely inside a home or garage than outdoors, this pollutant can be a problem in large urban areas. In 1995, for example, there was a strong temperature inversion in the city of Chicago that caused carbon monoxide levels to be pushed toward the ground, rather than dissipating. The toxic gas then found its way into some homes.
Is there a connection between global warming and geology?
Yes, there is an indirect connection between global warming and geology. Because changes in one part of the Earth's complex systems affect other parts. In particular, a change in the global atmosphere and biosphere can affect the rock cycle. A rise in sea level can change the expanse of glacial ice, change positions of deserts, and cause ocean waters to inundate coastlines, all of which would change rates and types of weathering taking place on our planet. Another important connection involves dissolved carbon dioxide in the oceans and surface water. Undoubtedly, the gas is taken up by organisms, but it also precipitates out of the ocean and surface waters to form certain sedimentary rocks. Carbon dioxide then returns to the system from a multitude of places, including the dissolution of carbonate minerals in rocks and shells, weathering of carbonate minerals, volcanic eruptions, or hot springs. Reactions with the atmosphere, respiration of organisms, and through streams and groundwater. Most scientists agree that a major change in the amount of carbon dioxide in or out of the environment can affect us all. Not only would humans and other living organisms be affected, but also the natural cycles connected to the world's geology. Still another geologic global warming connection may be found in the weather and climate. If global warming continues, more powerful and intense weather systems may develop. Such events as super hurricanes would cause a great deal of erosion along coastlines. Not to mention deluging countless rivers and creeks inland. In terms of climate change, variations in vegetation patterns could contribute to more erosion in various areas. Glacial, polar, and sea ice would change drastically, altering the amount of radiation reflected back into space, thus enhancing the warming effect. And changes in the hydrologic cycle would alter stream flow and groundwater levels.
What is a thermoscope and who invented it?
The history of the thermometer goes back to the ancient Greeks. It is not known exactly who invented a working thermometer, but the earliest record has Philo of Byzantium creating what was called a thermoscope back in the 2nd century BCE. Similarly, crude devices using the expansion of water due to temperature were used throughout the centuries. The prolific Renaissance inventor and artist Galileo Galilei, 1564 to 1642, improved the air thermoscope in 1593. The thermoscope he created uses a different approach to measuring temperatures than the thermometer. Instead of containing a fluid, such as mercury, that is sensitive to changes in heat and cold, the thermoscope suspends several objects within a transparent tube.
What is transportation forecasting?
Most people are probably familiar with this specialty in forecasting, which helps warn car drivers and truckers that road conditions could be hazardous. It also helps prepare local governments to clear streets and freeways, spray road salt or sand, and have law enforcement and emergency personnel ready for emergencies. On the business level, weather forecasts can warn shipping companies, for instance, not to ship perishable products in unrefrigerated or unheated trucks. Shipments by rail also need to be ready for unfavorable weather conditions. Some larger companies rely on private forecasting firms to provide them with timely advisories.
What important power source doesn't cause global warming?
although many people worry about what to do with the resulting waste products. Nuclear energy has the advantage of not generating global warming emissions. This fact has helped give a tremendous boost to U.S. nuclear reactors. But while the reactors themselves do not create emissions, such plants still leave a carbon footprint. This is because the uranium used to power them needs to be mined. The ore has to be shipped and processed, and plants have to be built and maintained. All of these things result in energy being used from sources such as gasoline and coal. As of 2008, there are 104 nuclear power plants in the United States, providing a little over 20% of the nation's electricity needs.
Has the Hudson River ever frozen over?
The Hudson River in New York State extends about 300 miles, 483 kilometers. From Lake Tier of the Clouds on Mount Marcy down to New York Bay. When people think of the Hudson, what comes to mind is the part of the river that flows through the New York metropolitan area. This section does not freeze often, the last time being in January of 1918. However, at the higher elevations near the river's source, the Hudson freezes quite regularly.
What makes the Historia Naturalis important in the history of meteorology?
The Historia Naturalis was written by Pliny the Elder, 23 to 79 c. E. and contained, among other scientific observations, an ambitious survey of weather conditions from Rome, Greece, Egypt, and Babylon. As with the earlier Meteorologica and on weather signs, though, it was still an inaccurate mix of objective science and myth-inspired superstition.
How many F5 tornadoes have there been in the United States since 1970?
There have been 28 F5 tornadoes in the United States since 1970. 6 of these occurred during the tornado outbreak of April 1974.
How is the wind chill calculated?
Wind chill is calculated using the following formula. Wind chill equals 35.74 plus 0.6215 T, 35.75, V 0.16, plus 0.4275 T, V 0.16. The wind chill is in degrees Fahrenheit, T is the air temperature, and V is the wind speed in miles per hour. Above is the official wind chill chart from the National Weather Service as of 2009.
Who created the first artificial snowflake?
Japanese physicist Yukichiro Nikkei, 1900 to 1962, created the first artificial snowflakes. At Hokkaido University in 1936. Nikkei, who was inspired by the photographs of Wilson A. Bentley, 1865 to 1931, also devised a rather poetic snowflake classification system, which he described in his 1954 book, Snow Crystals, Natural and Artificial.
How does the United States compare with China and Russia on energy use and production?
As of 2007, the United States gets 50% of its energy from coal and, in 2006, was burning 3 times as much oil, 21 million barrels, a day as China. America burns slightly less natural gas annually than Russia, which uses 604 billion cubic meters per year.
Wasn't 2008 one of the coolest years for the United States?
Yes, for the United States the 2008 temperature averages were the lowest since 1997. Also, precipitation was way up that year, which, along with it being a La Nina year, is a primary reason why meteorologists believe it was a considerably cooler season. The average temperature from January to October 2008 was 55.9 degrees Fahrenheit 13.3 degrees Celsius versus 55.7 degrees Fahrenheit 13.2 degrees Celsius in 1997. This made 2008 actually a fairly average year with regard to records kept over the last 114 years. However, global temperatures were the 9th highest on record in 2008.
What is a thunderstorm?
Thunderstorms are localized atmospheric phenomena that produce heavy rain, thunder and lightning, and sometimes hail. They are formed in cumulonimbus clouds, big and bulbous, that rise many miles into the sky. Most of the southeastern United States has over 40 days of thunderstorm activity each year. And there are about 100,000 thunderstorms across the country annually.
What should I do in the event of a flood?
If a flood is expected, turn on your battery-powered radio and listen for information about when and where to evacuate. If a flood or flash flood is coming toward you, move quickly to a higher elevation, but don't ever try to outrun a flood. Also, don't drive through standing water, as it can quickly rise and stall your vehicle, possibly trapping you among swift water.